Because the female lead Claude is beautiful. The 3 most handsome men in the Empire all want to marry her. But she doesn't want any of them. She only wants to live happily with her best friend Irene for the rest of her life. The male leads are all shocked. Her best friend Irene is even more terrified and wishes she were dead. You have to know that these men, in order to get Claude, don't hesitate to risk destroying the world, using demons to devour the consciousness of the female lead's brother Felix. For his sister's sake, brother Felix voluntarily falls into darkness. Finally, when he's about to slaughter the entire family, the 3 men pretend to be saviors and rescue Claude. And now she herself has become the rival of these lunatics, like most predecessors. Irene accidentally transmigrates into the book. In her previous life, she had the superpower to attract the same sex, so she was always surrounded by various girls. And this novel was her favorite. She often cried out that she wanted to take care of the female lead Claude, but she never expected that one day she would really transmigrate into the book. She even became a poor woman with 50 billion in debt, just when she was despairing. Angel like Claude saved her. She used her money power to help her pay off all debts. But her character in the original story would be killed by the male leads because of the female lead. She originally wanted Claude to get married early, so she could stay away from these dangerous people. She never expected to be confessed to by Claude in public. Now she's definitely doomed, facing Claude full of love. Irene really hopes she could have some awareness. After all, the Crown Prince looks like he wants to kill someone. He said to the Crown Prince, "Claude, I hope you're joking." As he spoke, he walked step by step toward Claude. Otherwise, I'll have to kill this fragile little thing. Seeing his hand already reaching toward Irene, with a crisp slap, the Crown Prince's hand was knocked away by Claude. Claude domineeringly protected Irene in front of her. "With me here, no one can hurt Irene." The crazy Duke also came to join the fun. He subtly threatened Irene to withdraw voluntarily. Claude domineeringly retorted, completely ignoring the trembling Irene. Suddenly, Irene felt a chill down her back. Only then did she remember there was another person. Sure enough, the Holy Knight was already preparing to kill, facing the siege of several madmen. Irene felt her life was in danger. Fortunately, Claude's brother appeared in time. This farce finally ended. Back home, Claude cried like a baby. She complained, "Those 3 men say they love me with their mouths, but actually it's like charity that won't accept refusal. Just like savages. I will never marry any of them in this lifetime." Only then did Irene remember. Claude is just an ordinary girl too, and she clearly knew their character. Yet for her own survival, she didn't hesitate to ruin her best friend's life. Irene apologized for forcing Claude, but Claude didn't mind at all. As long as she could hug Irene, all troubles would disappear. Claude asked Irene, "Will you be my best friend for life?" Irene smiled and happily agreed. Of course, she also knew she was still doomed to die. The next day, the female lead's brother Felix came to find Irene. He's not only handsome, but also extremely capable. At only 20, he became deputy minister of the magic department. And he's the legendary Super Sister Complex. Such a high-quality and wealthy man actually appeared at Irene's house today. Seeing the handsome guy's smile, Irene instantly became nervous and turned into a Lego person. Felix thought Irene was angry. Irene stiffly expressed that she absolutely wouldn't be angry at a handsome man. Felix flashed a brilliant smile thanking Irene for the compliment. This angelic appearance was simply too healing. Irene even felt she could die without regrets. Irene didn't expect she really was about to die. It turned out that after Felix's investigation, the maid in Irene's house had long been bought off, secretly poisoning Irene. Irene was horrified that she was really going to die. Irene asked Felix how long she had left to live. The answer was only half a day. Even more terrifying, several waves of people wanted to kill her, but fortunately, they were all dealt with by her brother. Irene was curious how Felix dealt with them. No wait, the point now is that she's been poisoned, right? Irene pitifully prepared to leave a will. She didn't expect Felix could detoxify. He reached out and placed his hand on her palm. Green light warmly spread throughout Irene's entire body. During the treatment, Felix kept thanking Irene. Because of her outstanding appearance, Claude had been kidnapped since childhood. This made her life very unhappy. Fortunately, with Irene's appearance, his sister is now much more cheerful. She even clamored to bring Irene back home, looking at the man talking to himself in front of her. Irene suddenly had a bad premonition. Sure enough, Irene heard Felix's gentle laughter. "Miss Irene, would you accept my kidnapping?" Soon Irene was in her best friend's arms. After learning about Irene's ordeal, her originally weak and helpless best friend actually became murderous and wanted to kill someone. Fortunately, her brother reminded her in time. Only then did Claude come to her senses. Claude took her best friend Irene's hand and gently comforted her. "Oh right, I also prepared a surprise for you." Claude grabbed Irene's hand. "You'll definitely like this gift. A huge chocolate waterfall." dazzling arrays of various desserts, and a brand new carousel under the sunlight. Irene was so shocked her jaw almost dropped. This place was simply heaven. The siblings thought Irene wasn't satisfied. They anxiously asked Irene to give them a chance to make amends. They planned to build another artificial river, and were about to go buy materials. Irene didn't understand the world of rich people, but she really couldn't handle such extravagance. Irene quickly said she was very happy, but Claude thought Irene was just comforting her. Clearly, Irene was her best friend, yet she didn't know what Irene liked. Irene's rational thread snapped with a bang. Irene shouted, "What I like most is money, and I like eating all kinds of delicious food. And I like looking at beautiful people, and I most like playing with friends. My childhood dream was to be a rich, unemployed wanderer." The next moment, Irene awkwardly knelt on the ground. She thought she would be despised as a useless good-for-nothing. But Claude was very happy, because she had both looks and money. She was definitely Irene's ideal type. Even brother Felix was very happy. Cute Irene was already very valuable. After hearing this, Irene was moved to tears. They are the best friends of Irene. That night, Irene shared the good news with her brother. She might live at Claude's house for the rest of her life. She also advised her brother to move over after graduation. Her best friend had already agreed. While Irene was talking, she happened to meet Felix. Irene wondered why he wasn't asleep yet. It turned out Felix wanted to chat about magic resistance. Previously, to prevent Claude's tragedy, she had asked Felix to definitely improve his magic resistance. Irene thought she would be scolded for this unreasonable request. She didn't expect him to readily agree. This time Felix wanted to ask Irene why she made him do this. Irene guiltily used prophecy as an excuse. Unexpectedly, Felix actually believed her. After all, this choice was indeed something he would make, even if the sacrifice wouldn't be remembered by anyone. As long as his sister could survive, that was enough. And demonic possession cannot be completely conscious. Even if magic resistance is improved, half would still be devoured by the demon. Although it wouldn't be as brutal as in the prophecy, it would still be hard to control one's desires. Irene suddenly realized demons might not be so scary. Even humans vent their desires. But actually, humans and demons are fundamentally different. After all, demons kill people based on their mood. 3 figures immediately appeared in Irene's mind. "These 3 people haven't already become demons, have they?" Felix said. "I understand what you mean, but..." Irene interrupted. "No, you don't understand. I hope you can live well, instead of dying tragically like in the prophecy. So will you listen to me?" Felix grabbed Irene's hand and said, "Of course I'll listen. Demons stimulate human desires. And I don't want you to get hurt," Felix said as he lowered his head to kiss Irene's hand. Irene questioned, "So your desire is to hurt me?" Felix didn't directly answer the girl's question. He just hoped Irene could leave him when the time came. But Irene grabbed Felix's hand tightly, strongly refusing Felix's request. "I know a good idea. If your desire is to bully me, then you can release your desire in advance." After Irene finished speaking, she trembled, waiting for Felix's attack. But Felix chose to refuse. Irene looked at his cold expression. She wanted to persuade him that holding it in would be bad for his health. Unexpectedly, the next moment, Irene's head was forcefully pressed onto Felix's leg by him. Resting on Felix's hard thigh was no different from resting on a rock, although Irene was really uncomfortable. Felix had no intention of letting Irene get up, even under Felix's gentle patting. Irene eventually fell into a deep sleep. Irene woke up with a swollen face. She immediately saw her crying best friend Claude. Irene was scared, thinking Claude had been bullied. It turned out she just wanted Irene to lie on her thigh too. Claude quickly told her brother to go to work. She wanted a 2-person world with Irene. She didn't expect Claude to be exposed by Felix for skipping classes. Felix rubbed his sister's head and said, "If you don't study seriously, Irene will be disappointed." Claude immediately rushed to the confused Irene. She grabbed Irene's hand tearfully, promising she would definitely study hard. Hearing that her best friend still liked her, Claude was instantly happy and wanted to hug Irene. Suddenly, an annoying cough sounded. It was Claude's father, Count Hugo, who had been there all along, but he was forbidden to speak by Felix, who said he was afraid of waking up a certain sleeping person. "That son-in-law, no wait, daughter-in-law, please have a private chat with me." Irene felt something was wrong. After all, she had stolen the hearts of both the son and daughter. As soon as she entered, she quickly apologized first, because she had caused Claude to have bad rumors. But the father said he wanted to thank Irene. For him, his daughter's happiness was most important. Irene wondered why he would come to her. It turned out to be about the crazy crown prince. The father got annoyed just thinking about that guy. Clearly Claude rejected him, but he still pestered her. But no matter what, he was still royalty. So he hoped she could help coax Claude. "Claude is too naive. I'm afraid she'll do something too extreme." Irene said she would definitely take good care of Claude. She didn't expect Count Hugo to look disdainful. Even though he quickly managed his expression, it was too late, because Irene had already seen it. Soon, Irene and Claude went out, facing her generous best friend's treat. Irene unhesitatingly ordered a whole menu of desserts. She had always dreamed of doing this once, although the prices were ridiculously expensive. Claude didn't mind at all. "I have money. Order whatever you want, no problem." What was supposed to be a happy afternoon tea turned into hearing several people mock Irene for being shameless. Claude's good mood was instantly ruined. She called the waiter over. "Excuse me, can I book the whole place?" After learning that booking required advance reservation, Claude said innocently, "Then I'll just buy the shop. Please make those people get lost." In the end, she was still stopped by Irene, although Claude didn't understand why. As long as Irene was happy, Claude was willing to do anything. Irene bought her favorite cotton candy. She and Irene happily tasted it together, but there were always people who didn't know better coming to disturb them. He not only harassed Claude about her appearance, but also brought his disgusting big face close to Claude. Claude immediately got angry and wanted to hit someone. Of course, she wouldn't forget to protect Irene. Claude mocked, "A greasy second-rate guy like you. Aren't you afraid of dirtying other people's eyes? Your ugly appearance is simply a biological weapon. Could you please disappear immediately?" The fat man was almost mad with anger. He reached out to teach the girl in front of him a lesson. The next moment, a bunch of men in black appeared. They instantly surrounded the fat man. The fat man looked at them in confusion. He was about to kneel and beg for mercy, but was directly grabbed by the men in black. Finally, he was ruthlessly dragged away like a dead pig. This scene was coincidentally seen by the blonde crown prince. He originally wanted to find an excuse to approach and chat, but got Claude's disgusted look, and all of this was within Irene's plan, to make those three madmen give up on Claude. She didn't eat or drink for 3 months, finally came up with a brilliant plan. That was to make these three people understand. To Claude, they were useless. Claude didn't need them at all. Unfortunately, there was one oversight. She didn't expect their faces to be thicker than city walls. He not only acted as if nothing happened and greeted them, but even blamed Claude for why she was avoiding him. Both of them were speechless. They really wanted to beat him up. Claude told the crown prince to take care of his fiancée. Unexpectedly, the crown prince declared his love loudly on the street. He said he only loved Claude. "Even if I marry hundreds of wives, you will always be my favorite." Irene was so embarrassed she almost had a cringe attack. She didn't expect the crown prince to suddenly target Irene. He thought it was all Irene's fault. The crown prince said sinisterly to Irene, "What exactly did you do to my Claude?" But Irene felt Claude had just found herself. She was no longer the timid child from before, but bravely seeking her own happiness. The crown prince kept saying he loved Claude, but he wouldn't let her do what she wanted. The crown prince dismissed it with a curl of his lip. "I'll agree to whatever Claude wants to do." Claude quickly said, "Just don't come looking for me." Only then did the crown prince realize something was wrong. His eyes became sharp with murderous intent. Claude continued to domineeringly protect her best friend. "Don't go too far." With that, Claude pulled Irene away from the crown prince and left. The two thought they could finally get rid of the crown prince. Unexpectedly, National Day was coming soon. All nobles had to attend the national celebration. Claude's family not only had overwhelming power, but also had endless money, so she couldn't refuse to attend. But this way she would be pestered by the annoying crown prince again. At this time, Irene suddenly received a call from her brother. She answered the phone and learned her family had also been invited to the celebration. Even thinking with her butt, she understood. The crown prince was definitely up to no good. But Irene wouldn't just sit and wait for death. In the deep night at the mansion, Irene put on black clothes and quietly went out. She thought no one was around. Suddenly she was startled by a familiar voice. Felix was actually still awake. He asked where Irene was going, and said he could take her there, but was immediately refused by Irene. She could only go see that person alone. Thinking Irene was meeting a man, Felix's eyes instantly became ice cold. Irene tremblingly explained she was meeting a woman, and the kind who could protect her. Hearing this, Felix suddenly returned to his angelic smile. He no longer stopped Irene from going out, just gave her a magic stone, telling Irene to definitely break the stone if she was in danger. Only then did he feel at ease letting her find her target. The Empire currently had two major secret organizations. One was the Chaos City, controlled by the purple-haired Duke. The other was the intelligence-gathering Serentium, and Irene's target was the beautiful boss of Serentium, Martina. Martina had an unfortunate childhood, so she had been extremely love-starved since young. Irene used this point, using her sincerity to accompany and listen to her heart, plus her abnormal attraction to the same sex. She successfully captured the heart of beautiful sister Martina. But the result was a bit different from what Irene imagined. But it didn't affect their pure relationship. Every time Irene saw her sister, she was very happy. Her sister just slightly hooked her finger, and Irene would pounce into her arms like a little dog. Irene excitedly caught up with her sister. It's just that sometimes Irene's face hurt a bit. As the boss of an intelligence organization, Martina naturally knew about Irene's recent situation. Although you're pitiful, I won't personally help you, but I can tell you some news. That purple-haired guy came to buy your information before. But strangely, he only asked about your preferences and such, although Irene was also puzzled. But now the royal ball was more important. Irene pleaded, I need some intelligence. Otherwise I might have to be buried there. Facing her cute sister's request, her sister naturally had no reason to refuse. Soon it was National Day. For the ball preparations, Claude bought all the clothing stores in the Empire, just to pick the best clothes for Irene. But Irene was already tired and scared. She had to stop Claude. Irene boasted that she looked good in anything. Even though the shop assistant looked shocked, Irene glared threateningly at her to agree with her. Unexpectedly, the assistants still firmly shook their head. Irene immediately shed tears of sadness. Felix suddenly appeared, praising that it was because Irene was too beautiful that they couldn't pick suitable clothes. Irene felt like she saw an angel descending. Irene asked brother Felix to quickly persuade Claude, but Felix's eyes made Irene have a bad premonition. Seeing him excitedly join the discussion of picking clothes for Irene, Irene couldn't help but sigh. Angel brother actually backstabbed me. They even used their money power to make the shop assistant actively join the praise army. Sure enough, this was a realistic society. At night, the three rode in a carriage to the venue. The Angel siblings got off first. Both wore exquisite evening gowns. Even their hair was glowing, and their grand entrance was all for one person. Irene was somewhat troubled. This would only make her more nervous. The siblings gently took Irene's hands. We will always protect you, facing the gossip around them. Irene clutched her dress nervously. Felix comforted, those people's words have no value. Claude also told Irene not to pay attention to them. Otherwise we'll become as ugly as them. The siblings were always like this, caring for her time and time again. What was supposed to be a warm outing was ruined by the crown prince. He actually put the three in different palaces. He was obviously doing it on purpose. Fortunately, the siblings made a pure gold compass. Irene could know their location just by opening it. Irene was thinking about how to deal with the blonde later. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Unexpectedly, when Irene opened the door, she saw a man sitting on the windowsill. The guy's greasy face could even reflect light. Irene embarrassingly turned into a Lego person immediately. She turned around saying the man had the wrong person. The man anxiously tried to keep Irene. He shouted that he had something to say, then he cleared his throat, and actually started confessing directly. Irene was speechless. Was he a madman? Looking at the passionate confession scene, she suddenly felt somewhat familiar. Wasn't this just a salesman's routine? Irene instantly became a rejection expert. I'm not buying. I have no money. Then Irene turned around and said goodbye directly. She was very experienced at rejecting salesmen. She didn't expect the man to instantly change his expression. He gripped Irene's wrist forcefully. He viciously forced Irene to be with him. Looking at the man's gradually tightening grip, Irene immediately knew this person had bad intentions. Logically, this was the right time for a hero to save the beauty. But Irene never followed the script. She aimed at the man's crotch and kicked hard. The man simply couldn't believe it. Taking advantage of the man falling to the ground, Irene quickly fled the scene. She secretly prayed she hadn't kicked the man into disability. Otherwise, she would be in big trouble. Suddenly, with a thud, Irene bumped into someone. Irene fell to the ground and was about to apologize. The next moment, Irene saw a familiar back. Felix was already laughing like crazy. Irene wondered why he was here. It turned out he was worried about Irene, but now it seemed unnecessary. With that, he reached out to pull Irene up. Felix pulled Irene up while casting healing magic. Irene anxiously tried to explain. Felix just looked at Irene with a doting smile. Originally, I wanted to cripple that guy's hands. Now that you acted, it's convenient for him. Then Felix invited Irene to have tea. He said there were her favorite grapefruit tarts there, but the happy them didn't notice. A figure was monitoring them from not far away. After that banquet, Irene was confessed to by different men every day. Even extras came in groups to propose. Irene could tell it was the crown prince's doing. Although they weren't handsome, they were either very rich or very powerful. But how could they compete with these two siblings? Moreover, those extras had bad tempers. Just because Irene rejected their confessions, they actually publicly insulted Irene. Irene was really getting annoyed. Irene smiled, a cute girl like me. Isn't it normal not to like you? The man became angry from embarrassment and was about to attack Irene. Suddenly, someone called Irene's name. Seeing it was the beautiful Miss Claude. The man immediately wanted to win Claude's attention. Claude completely ignored him. She just brought Irene a carefully prepared bouquet. These are flowers that only bloom in spring. Irene asked Claude where the flowers came from. Claude said she specially went to the Crown Prince's greenhouse to pick them. Irene was so scared she almost threw the flowers away. Claude felt sorry seeing Irene sweating profusely. The two turned to stare at the man. Claude politely said, "Can I take Irene away?" The man dumbly said, "But I haven't finished talking." Claude smiled sweetly. "If Irene gets heat stroke." Suddenly, Claude's expression changed. "I'll twist your head off." The man was instantly petrified and didn't dare say more. Finally, it was just the two best friends' world. Claude even specially gave a handkerchief she embroidered herself, looking at the pattern on the handkerchief. Irene asked, "Is this a spider?" Claude immediately looked dejected. Irene continued asking, "Could it be the sun?" Seeing Claude's teary eyes, it seemed she guessed wrong again. Irene quickly brainstormed thinking about the pattern. She thought of the gift she just received. So Irene decisively said, "This must be a flower." This time she finally got it right. Irene finally managed to coax her rich best friend. She didn't expect to receive another bouquet representing death. Of course, it also contained the Crown Prince's threatening message. Irene complained, "What an unlucky man." No matter how many methods he used, no one could compare to her monogamy. Finally came the celebration banquet. The huge golden dragon made Irene's eyes light up with excitement. The light bursting from the golden dragon instantly illuminated the entire hall. She excitedly shared her joy with Claude. Unexpectedly, Claude could barely keep her eyes open from sleepiness. Brother Felix directly stood up, looking at his drowsy sister. He said to Irene, "I'll take Claude back to her room first." Irene waved goodbye to the two. With the siblings gone, she could go find the person to help her. The novel's famous villainess, Erika. Irene wanted to quietly approach her. Unexpectedly, she hadn't even met the beautiful sister yet. She first encountered her scumbag father. Irene wanted to pretend not to know him and sneak away, but was still discovered by the scumbag father. The scumbag father shouted Irene's name. She didn't understand why the person who sold his own daughter was looking for her. The scumbag father loudly told Irene to come over. Irene said coldly, "Sir, I don't know you either. Why are you acting this way toward a stranger?" The scumbag father got angry. "I raised you for so long. From any angle, I'm your father." Hearing this, people around started gossiping. Irene questioned, "So what do you want to do this time?" It turned out the scumbag father wanted Irene to get married. Felix was curious about the identity of the person Irene was supposed to marry. Learning it was Count Tiber, Claude instantly exploded with anger. She angrily said, "That guy could be Irene's grandfather." Hearing Irene say this could be used, she instantly understood everything. Is it that despicable crown prince causing trouble again? But her brother didn't agree with his sister's statement. It's not good to say that about him. Claude raged, "Then he's just garbage in a pile of ruins." Claude found her brother's attitude somewhat strange. This time, he could actually be so calm. It turned out the Count's country was separated from the Empire by a sea, and on the sea, no country had jurisdiction. So he could completely sink that guy to the bottom of the sea. Of course, she was just talking. Claude suddenly thought of an idea to protect Irene. She could have her father adopt Irene. This was immediately rejected by Brother Felix. If Irene becomes father's adopted daughter, how can I marry Irene? Irene quickly stopped the siblings' argument. She actually had a better way. Previously at the banquet hall, she had already communicated with Erika, although it was just a glance. She believed she had made an impression on her. Erika indeed didn't refuse her invitation. Irene once again met the beautiful red-haired sister, although this was their first formal meeting. She knew everything about Irene. "It's really amazing that you can get the love of those siblings. I heard she even picked the royal flowers for you. But do flowers really want to be picked?" In Irene's view, flowers also have their own will, but Erika immediately refuted. "Flowers don't need these, they just need to be beautiful. But if you can't live freely once, wouldn't life be too regrettable?" This sentence completely moved Erika. As the only daughter of the family, she had been a family tool since birth. The family used every means to make her the crown prince's consort, in the original story, to consolidate her position. She always made things difficult for Claude, and the crown prince also used Erika's bullying of Claude to make Claude more dependent on him, until the ending when Erika was completely eliminated. Erika's whole life was spent being used, but Irene understood. Erika wasn't interested in power and status. She was just a beautiful puppet manipulated by her family. So losing her freedom, she must be very curious about what flowers really want. If you're willing to help me, I'll tell you what a flower's will is. Facing the unique Irene, they finally reached a cooperation. Soon at the Imperial Council, Erika's father raised objections to Irene's marriage. Although Count Tibor's country was small, they should still choose someone of matching status. Wasn't this marriage somewhat inappropriate? Hearing this, others chimed in. The crown prince was almost mad with rage. He thought it was the crazy duke's doing, seeing him pretend to be innocent. even saying he would personally select other beauties to send to Count Tiber's country. The crown prince was convinced it was this guy's doing. He verbally agreed. After the meeting ended, the crown prince directly attacked a crazy duke. The duke was scared and confused. The crown prince angrily said, "You damn bastard! Why did you interfere? You even got Daffurasian to apply pressure." The duke explained, "You're really wronging me this time. I wouldn't do such a stupid thing. If I acted, I would definitely make her become the adopted daughter of Claude's family. After all, Count Hugo is famous for doting on his daughter. Whatever Claude likes, he will support. And that Irene is not simple. She might have the ability to bewitch people. This kind of person can move hearts with just one sentence. Humans are particularly susceptible to emotional manipulation. She's like a perfect rough stone. It really makes one want to destroy that beauty. Of course, right now the priority is helping you solve the problem. I have a plan for this. Do you want to hear it?" On the other side, hearing that Irene found Erika to help, Claude was both angry and worried. She turned to ask Irene, "Are you closer to Erika than to me?" Irene quickly laughed and denied it. "You're the person I have the best relationship with." Hearing this, Claude blushed. At this moment, brother Felix suddenly appeared beside Irene. "What about me?" Irene happily said, "Of course, we also have a very good relationship." The siblings' father listened to the three's mushy words. Did he really have to call Irene Renee? But her brother felt father definitely couldn't say it. Father unconvincingly wanted to try, but embarrassingly couldn't say a complete sentence. He shyly shouted that the banquet was important. Irene laughed. She didn't expect the count to have a cute side too. But as soon as they arrived at the banquet hall, Irene was startled. Erika actually took the initiative to find Irene, inviting her to live together. Claude quickly protected Irene, firmly expressing she didn't want to. She didn't expect Erika to be rejected to her face, but laughed very happily, because she found the girl really too cute. Erika chose to step back. To make up for the regret, "Can I call you Irene?" Best friend Claude was 100% unwilling. Irene was surprised by the derailed plot. Two great beauties were actually competing for her. Irene was thinking about how to ease the relationship, but best friend Claude would never back down. The excited Claude hugged tighter and tighter. Irene gradually couldn't breathe. Then she was knocked unconscious by Claude. When Irene woke up again, she was already back at the Count's mansion, looking at the maid sister nearby. She really didn't understand, although they had to serve her every day. Why did they still like her so much? It was like she was everyone's pet, but there didn't seem to be any difference. Suddenly, Felix came in. He brought bad news. That crazy duke wanted to see Irene, but he had already refused immediately. After all, that guy controlled Chaos City. He didn't look like a good person from any angle, although Irene didn't like that person either. But to save Claude, she had to meet with the duke. Seeing that he couldn't stop Irene, Felix had to choose to go together. So he extended his hands to Irene. Irene wondered what Felix wanted to do. It turned out Claude had bragged about hugging Irene, but he had never done it once. Felix smiled brightly. "You hug me too." Irene's heart immediately started racing. She unconsciously rushed forward. Who told Irene she couldn't resist Felix's looks? Felix carried Irene and walked outside. He told Irene not to go with strangers casually. After saying this, he smiled and asked for kisses, making Irene's cheeks burn. She struggled shyly but couldn't escape. Soon the two arrived at the Duke's mansion. As soon as they opened the door, they saw the Duke surrounded by smoke. The pungent smell throughout the room almost choked Irene to death. Fortunately, Felix purified the air in time. He darkly told the other party to put out the cigarette. The crazy Duke provocatively said, "Oh no, what should I do? I just lit it." Felix irritably stretched out his hand. Cold air instantly purified the entire room. The crazy Duke casually threw away the cigarette in his hand. The crazy Duke smiled and said, "I just wanted to get along well with you." Irene helplessly said, "Then please don't smoke." The crazy Duke laughed. "Strange. Other young ladies all like it." Irene felt it was such a pity. "You're actually quite handsome. But because of this cigarette, you smell like shit." The sinister Duke was somewhat stunned. Felix on the side almost couldn't hold back his laughter. After the Duke was stunned for a while, he smiled and said Irene's words were very crude. Instantly, he changed his expression and said sinisterly, "Don't try to provoke me. So how can I please you now?" Irene was helpless against his thick-skinned attitude. She could only speak the truth bluntly. "I'd be grateful if you just stayed away from me." Irene decided to stop beating around the bush. "The purpose of my visit today is to make you give up on Claude. After all, she will never like you. But the Duke chose not to accept this. As long as I get her person, I'll eventually win her heart too." Felix couldn't stand it anymore upon hearing this. "If you dare lay a hand on my sister, I'll make you regret being alive." The crazy Duke ignored Felix's threat. He turned his focus back to Irene. "I heard you're someone who really likes money. Although the Hugo family is wealthy, I'm even wealthier than them. Why don't you consider me as well?" Irene firmly rejected the man's invitation. I will stay with Count Hugo and his family for the rest of my life, even if the Count's family loses everything. No matter what happens, I will never regret it. After the two left the Duke's mansion, Irene worried that Felix might be angry, but he was actually laughing happily. He had just seen the Duke get shut down by Irene. He couldn't have been more delighted. Felix patted Irene's head. Here, Irene doesn't need to give in. As long as you can be happy, that's the best outcome for us. Soon it was Irene's birthday. The wealthy siblings made a dazzling entrance. Before Irene could react, she was already overwhelmed by a pile of gifts. Only then did she remember today was her birthday. Looking at the excited Claude, Irene thanked the siblings for taking such good care of her. But she had more important matters to attend to. As outstanding children of a magical family, Felix possessed extremely high magical talent. Claude was also a rare genius spirit master, but she still couldn't form a contract with Elf. And all of this was because of that lunatic, the phantom elf Seethes. Because he always wanted to destroy Claude's will, the kind elf would prevent Claude from contracting. And now the only solution was to find a high-level elf in the human world. Use the advantages of the human realm to form a contract with it. Irene pondered for a long time. She finally narrowed it down to Kamoli Island, from all the intelligence gathered. This place must have the elf we're looking for. Unfortunately, they were now banned from entry by the Merchant Guild. Irene was troubled about how to get in. The wealthy siblings had a solution. Why don't they just buy the island? It would be perfect for us to go on vacation and look for elf while we're at it. Having such wealthy friends was truly Irene's blessing, but Irene wasn't satisfied yet. She asked Claude how to communicate with men. Claude suddenly had a bad feeling. What man? Do you have someone you like? Claude learned from Irene that this person was quite decent. Claude was shocked beyond belief again. She frantically wanted to know which bastard it was, but was suddenly interrupted by Felix. It turned out their mother was looking for her. Claude had no choice but to get up and leave. She instructed Irene to definitely tell her who this man was later. Felix smiled as he watched his sister leave. Finally, only Felix and Irene remained. Irene immediately told Felix the good news. Kamoli Island had already been purchased by them. It only cost a mere 80 billion. But Felix didn't care about that. He only wanted to know who the man Irene mentioned earlier was. Looking at Felix's smiling face, Irene's heart started racing again. She stammered out the second prince's name. Felix forcefully pulled Irene closer by her life ring. So Irene, do you want to get close to the second prince? Seeing Felix's blue eyes filled with bone-chilling coldness, Irene frantically explained she only wanted to win over the second prince. Hearing the satisfactory response, Felix's expression instantly turned from stormy to sunny. Felix gently gave Irene a head pat. To prevent you from being led astray by others, I should take you to formally meet father first. Of course not for marriage, but to inform the Count about the prophecy. After Irene explained the whole situation, the Count was nearly driven to death by anger. The dignified crown prince of the empire actually wanted to destroy the world because of a woman, and dared to release Larage, the legendary great demon. Felix was more composed. He comforted them that everything would be fine. The Count was angry that Felix wanted to sacrifice himself. You must know that once you accept demonic power, whether dead or alive, you'll be branded as a heretic. Even the entire family would be buried with you. But Felix had already planned everything. They don't know I've already enhanced my magical resistance. When the time comes, I can fake my death and escape. After explaining the plan, Felix was severely beaten by the Count. Irene looked at Felix with heartache. Can't you be kinder to yourself? Once you successfully fake your death, you'll have to hide in the shadows like a ghost from then on. But Felix didn't care about these things. He was a selfish man. He only needed them to stay alive. But Irene wasn't satisfied with this. She said maybe they could think of other solutions, like taking out those 3 people right now. This idea was mercilessly opposed by Felix. She should help Felix apply medicine first. Irene suddenly remembered he knew healing magic. She told Felix to heal himself. The next moment, Felix instantly closed the distance between him and Irene. Felix said, "But I want you to help me apply the medicine." Irene's heart pounded with shyness. Irene poked Felix's face and said, "Heal properly, don't flirt with me." Felix still obediently let Irene touch his cheek, but Irene's heart was still uneasy. Even at night in her dreams, she could see scenes of Felix's family being exterminated. Seeing Felix's blood-red eyes, combined with Claude's tears of despair, instantly woke Irene from her dream. Although she had made all preparations, she didn't know if the outcome could be changed. Especially after meeting Claude, listening to Claude's plans for the future, she felt she shouldn't hide all this. "Claude, I want to tell you something. You must listen calmly to everything I say." Soon Felix received a letter from the Crown Prince. He pretended to be relaxed and comforted Irene. "I'll be back soon," as if it were just an ordinary outing. Tremendous thunder roared across the night sky. At this moment, inside the abandoned castle, Felix was being brutally stepped on. His disheveled body was pierced with demonic artifacts. The more he resisted the demon's invasion, the more excited the crazy Duke became. Even the Crown Prince couldn't help but stop the Duke. At that very moment, a magic spell cut the Duke's ankle. The Duke crouched down with an evil smile. Didn't expect you could still use magic. He turned to ask the Holy Knight to heal him, but was mercilessly refused. The Mad Duke laughed instead of getting angry, saying it was your own decision to join us, so why are you so angry? The Holy Knight frowned and said, "Thank you so much for the reminder." Then the Duke pulled out a cigarette from his pocket. After lighting the cigarette in his hand, he blew the smoke from his mouth into Felix's face, saying, "I forgive you for hurting my leg." Facing this provocation, Felix raised his hand to cast magic to block the Mad Duke's approach. But immediately he coughed up blood. The Mad Duke grabbed Felix's chin, telling him not to waste effort using magic, or he'd die faster. With that, he stuffed the cigarette into Felix's mouth, took a deep drag, and exhaled. Felix was choked and coughed repeatedly, and the Mad Duke praised him. "Good boy. This thing can ease your pain, though it won't last long, but you should make good use of this time. You can leave final words for your dear family, especially for that lady you love. If you commit suicide, you'll be devoured by the demon. So why don't you just talk to the demon directly and die peacefully?" With that, the Mad Duke placed a pack of cigarettes on Felix's leg, saying, "You must get used to that feeling. I'm really curious whether that lady will say to you the same thing she said to me." The Mad Duke put his ring on Felix's finger. "Will she say what she said last time? You smell like shit?" After saying all this, the Mad Duke stood up. Then he waved goodbye to Felix, watching the figures of the group leaving. At the moment the door was about to close, Felix's eyes flashed with cold light. He used a substitute doll to successfully complete his fake death plan. Then, covered in blood, he immediately went to Irene's room. Under the demon's instigation, Felix reached out his desire-filled hand toward Irene. But at the moment he was about to truly touch Irene, it turned into a gentle head pat. Felix smiled tenderly and said, "I'm back, Irene." Irene pinched her own cheeks hard. After feeling the pain, she confirmed she wasn't dreaming. Seeing Felix covered in blood before her, she was immediately frightened and touched him all over to check his condition. Little did she know that Felix was desperately restraining himself. He was clearly only in his 20s, yet he could withstand the demon's devouring. After the Mad Duke and his group left, Felix calmly used the ring on his hand to light the cigar. He took several deep drags, and while the pain was temporarily relieved, he then ruthlessly pulled out the arrow from his shoulder. Even as blood gushed out, Felix remained calm, leaning against the wall. It's just that the demon in his head was talking a bit too much. Seeing Felix ignore him, the demon actually directly shattered his glasses. Felix was really annoyed beyond endurance. He said to the demon, "You should continue sleeping obediently." Only then did the demon realize he had been tricked. He actually wanted to use his body to seal himself, but Felix still underestimated the demon's power. L'Orage symbolizes love and desire, whether it's an angry Irene or an Irene who cares for him. Both would infinitely amplify Felix's desires. The demon's voice kept instigating him. "You want to make her cry and then watch her beg you for mercy, don't you?" Felix's rationality in his heart kept crumbling, and the demon continued to bewitch him. "You want her eyes to only look at you." His gaze began to change. His hand touched Irene's shoulder. "Please leave my room, I'm really dangerous right now." Felix turned away, not daring to look at the girl again. Unexpectedly, his hand was grabbed by Irene. Irene said to him, "Even if what lies ahead is hell, I will accompany you." Felix blushed and almost couldn't control himself. He forcefully shook off Irene's hand. "Please leave quickly." Irene looked at Felix in disbelief. Finally, she left the room in disappointment. After the door was completely closed, Felix finally relaxed and lay on the bed. His powerful endurance even made the demon compliment him as impressive. By the next morning, the demon again instigated Felix to possess Irene, saying it could lend Felix power. According to its thousands of years of experience, true love all begins with possession. Felix immediately showed a disgusted expression. But it must be said, the demon was quite magical. Although he was covered in wounds yesterday, today he had completely recovered. He even had a few more abs. But so what? The demon was just a chatterbox anyway. Felix got dressed and prepared to go out, but saw an unexpected scene. Irene had actually slept outside his door all night. Felix approached Irene and gently told the girl to go back to her room to sleep. By the way, remember to lock the door properly. This cold tone instantly scared Irene awake. Irene wondered if it was because of the demon, that Felix seemed to have become a bit fiercer, and more importantly, his body seemed more robust, and had become more sexy. Irene kept hitting her own head, thinking he's still a wounded person. How can I think such things? Irene again reached out to check Felix's injuries, but she unexpectedly slipped, just as she was about to fall heavily. Fortunately, Felix caught Irene's wrist in time. But his excessive strength also hurt Irene. Irene's wrist immediately showed purple bruises. Seeing Felix fearfully distance himself, Irene forced herself to say she was fine. But Felix was very clear about his own strength. Irene's wrist might even be fractured, even if she didn't care. Felix was very afraid. He was afraid that one day he would deeply hurt Irene. Irene blinked her eyes. "I know you don't want me to get hurt, but I also want to protect you. Felix, I just want you to know that as long as it's you, I don't mind whatever you do." These words immediately made Felix's face red and heart race. "If you knew what I wanted, you would definitely be afraid." Irene was curious about what his desire really was. "You don't want to kill me, do you?" Suddenly, Felix had a violent coughing fit. Irene wanted to step forward to check the situation, but Felix shouted not to come closer. He explained this was just the demon's rejection reaction. Then he left as if nothing had happened. When Felix returned again, he was holding a long sword. Because of the demon's presence, Felix could no longer use magic, but fortunately he wouldn't die for now. He said to Irene, "If I do something you hate to you, this sword can protect you well." After giving the sword to Irene, Felix could finally approach Irene with peace of mind. Felix planned to go see his family. After a night of fermentation, the entire empire knew about Felix's death. Felix wanted to quickly reassure his family. He pushed open the door. His family was all waiting for him in the room, looking at his worried sister. Felix's eyes were full of tenderness. Claude anxiously ran toward him. He opened his arms, waiting for his sister to throw herself into his embrace. But Claude's concerned and heartbroken expression finally turned into a heavy slap. That landed hard on Felix's face. Everyone was dumbfounded seeing this. Claude said, "Your reputation has always been good. I heard people are even going to hold a memorial service for you. Should I congratulate you?" After saying this, Claude could no longer control her emotions and covered her face crying. Although she knew this was the best outcome, she didn't know why everything had to be borne by her brother. Irene felt sorry for Claude's distress. But what was more important now was the funeral. The fact that Felix was faking his death absolutely couldn't let those three discover anything unusual. Irene wanted Claude to perform fake crying, but seeing her poor acting skills, she decided not to make things difficult for Claude. She told Claude to try feeling angry that Felix bore everything alone. Just as the two were discussing acting skills, the mad trio suddenly appeared as the culprits who caused everything. The group was actually talking and laughing. What was unexpected, though, was that all three observed funeral etiquette. Of course, the most unexpected was still Claude. She clenched her fists tightly, and under Irene's shocked gaze, Claude punched the crown prince hard. The crown prince immediately spat out red tomato juice. He fell to the ground in disbelief. Facing Claude's fury, he not only stopped his subordinates from helping, but also laughed very perversely. "You can finally notice me. Now, even if I lock you in prison, no one will blame me. Even if you hate me now, I don't care. I just hope you remember today. Otherwise, you'll soon lose someone precious again." Irene immediately felt the malice around her, especially the Holy Knight's sinister gaze. That made everyone uncomfortable. "What are you trying to say? I just think killing you would be simple, so please don't force me to act." The Mad Duke also joined in. "It's a pity you didn't see Felix's pathetic state. Although he usually looks so noble, he hides unspeakable secrets, which is his lust for you, a greed for his lover's body." Irene was really angry. She accused the Duke. "He's already dead, and you still want to insult him like this?" Hearing the others' indifferent laughter, she really wanted Claude to punch him again. Irene and Claude decided to ignore the group. The two turned and walked directly toward the funeral. Many people came to the ceremony. Everyone was lamenting Felix's fate. But Irene was looking for another man, the Empire's second prince Cedric. After some internal struggle, she finally pulled on the second prince's sleeve. "Is it convenient to find a place to chat?" Cedric was somewhat surprised but didn't refuse. Soon the two came to an empty rooftop. Cedric spoke. "Although I'm not the most moral man, I didn't expect you to be so frivolous. Your husband just died and you're already coming to me to cheat." Irene was confused. What was this brat saying? She directly stated her purpose. "I'm looking for you for cooperation. I'll make you a useful person. Find meaning for your life." In the original story, the second prince, unable to bear seeing Claude being tortured, took the initiative to help her escape the palace. Although he was ultimately killed by having his heart ripped out, this was also a choice he had long prepared for. He had always been searching for the meaning of living. Therefore, Irene believed that this time he would accept her proposal. And to fight against the three mad male leads, Claude must become stronger. The group planned to go to Kamoli Island to find elves. They thought it would be a happy girls' trip. But little did they know this journey would be extremely dangerous. Not only did they have to constantly change disguises to avoid detection, but to sign contracts with elves, they also needed more magic potions. Out of curiosity, Irene tried making magic potions herself. Soon she brought a box for Felix to taste. The moment Felix drank it, he instantly felt like he was poisoned. But knowing it was made by Irene, Felix immediately changed his expression and praised it as very good. Just that the side effects are strong, so better not drink it. He hypocritically said Irene was very talented. If you're willing, I can be your private tutor. Irene embarrassedly wanted to refuse, but Felix said everything of his belonged to Irene. Please don't deprive me of my happiness. Irene finally shyly agreed, but her gaze gradually moved downward, just in time to see Felix's massive chest muscles. She remembered what Erika had said, if the man you fall in love with has a good physique, you'll be happy every day. Irene's face immediately turned red as if about to explode. After nightfall, because of the demon's side effects, Felix burned to 100 degrees. As his consciousness gradually blurred, the demon's power took the opportunity to invade Felix. When Felix opened his eyes again, he saw his beloved girl actually appeared before him. The desire buried deep in his heart completely erupted at this moment. When Felix opened his eyes again, he realized the scene just now was a dream he had. Suddenly, a wet towel appeared on Felix's forehead. Irene appeared by his bedside, asking if he had a nightmare. At this moment, Felix reached his hand toward Irene. He suddenly grasped the back of Irene's head and pulled her close to him. Irene, I warned you. Do you have the sword I gave you with you? As the two drew closer, the atmosphere began to become somewhat ambiguous. Irene unexpectedly pressed her forehead against Felix's forehead. You want me to help you check your temperature? The ambiguous atmosphere was immediately broken. Facing Irene's concern, Felix could only helplessly lie down and sigh. Fortunately, Felix's body recovered quickly. But remembering the scenes from his dream, he still didn't dare to be alone with Irene. Soon it was time to depart for Kamoli Island. The wealthy siblings directly bought a train. Thinking about the place they were going being remote and poor, possibly without even a few people, Claude was very happy because she had never been to such a poor place. But she got excited and easily sleepy, so she got up to go rest. Only Felix and Irene were left in the carriage. Felix somewhat awkwardly covered his mouth and nose, because to him, Irene's scent was tempting and sweet. Felix got up wanting to change carriages, but unexpectedly, Irene suddenly grabbed Felix's sleeve. Can you stay and keep me company? The physical contact made Felix's heart restless. His body temperature rose uncontrollably. And looking at Irene, who was so close, he forced himself to stay calm and breathed out. Just listen to me, Irene. After saying this, he forcefully shook off the girl's hand and turned to walk toward the carriage exit. Watching Felix's departing figure, Irene suddenly remembered the Duke's words. Could Felix really want to possess me? She imagined intimate scenes between them, and she didn't seem to dislike it either. So Irene no longer hesitated and got up to chase after Felix. She forcefully grabbed Felix's hand. Since you made me get used to your presence, you have to take good responsibility for me. Irene lifted his trembling hand. Touch my head again. Unexpectedly, Irene was pushed away forcefully. Felix punched and shattered the wall. Although the scene was scary, Irene would never give up. Having no choice, Felix could only helplessly surrender. Irene also had the chance to ask the doubt in her heart. Is your desire to kill me? Of course not. Then is it to break my limbs and torture me? I certainly couldn't possibly do that. Then there's no problem. But Felix worried he would ruin Irene. Even if you can destroy walls, people aren't that easily hurt. Saying this, Irene forcefully hugged Felix. So hurry up and touch my head. Felix's hesitant hand kept hovering, but finally gently stroked Irene's head. Now his body temperature was even hotter than when he had a 100-degree fever, and the sweet taste from Irene's body was simply tempting poison. Soon the group reached the port, but were told they couldn't set sail. Kamoli Island is very dangerous now. If you don't want to die, don't go. It turned out that since Kamoli Island was bought, anyone who approached the island would die. Irene was completely stunned, because the person who originally bought the island was her. She had also asked the trading company to land on the island first to investigate. She never expected this would cause their deaths. At this moment, Irene's stomach also growled. Irene cried, "I'm simply not human!" The next moment, Claude stuffed a sandwich into Irene's mouth. Claude encouraged Irene that only by staying alive was their hope. Irene said, "But how do we get to the island without a ship?" Claude said, "Then we'll just buy our own ship. And these people you hired. With these, we can definitely find the elves." Hearing Claude's comfort, Irene's mood immediately improved considerably. Unexpectedly, a seagull suddenly swooped over. It took the opportunity to snatch the sandwich from her hand. Irene's previous sad mood instantly dissipated. She now just wanted to severely teach that bird a lesson. But Irene's physical strength was really too poor. Soon she collapsed exhausted on the beach. But she unexpectedly saw a familiar person, Anthony from the trading company. Felix heard the commotion and came to check. Seeing Anthony seriously injured, Felix took the initiative to carry the boy for treatment. He asked about the situation of the other company members. Anthony said, although he wasn't too sure, they should all still be alive. He only remembered everything going smoothly at first, but at a certain moment, the navigation compass spun wildly, and the several thousand-ton ship was directly overturned by the sea. When he woke up again, he was in a forest. Everyone there was crazy, and their food had problems. He had been hungry for several days before finding a chance to jump into the sea and escape. Hearing this, Irene immediately panicked. She felt this elf might also be crazy. Irene wanted to persuade Claude to give up, but Claude firmly refused. She must sign her own elf contract before those three act. Since Claude was so determined, then Irene would definitely give her full support. They boarded the ship they had bought outright. Soon they could see the island in the distance. The obviously ancient flag totems made Irene curious about the island's situation. Suddenly, intense dizziness struck. Fortunately, Felix caught Irene in time. The extremely close face-to-face made both their hearts flutter. The two quickly separated in embarrassment. At this moment, they suddenly saw Claude standing on the deck. Irene reached out wanting to grab her. Just then, the ship shook violently. When Irene woke up again, she only felt her body was restrained. She carefully felt the object in front of her. These familiar large chest muscles. Irene looked up ahead. Felix's handsome face appeared before her. But now wasn't the time to be infatuated. Irene tried hard to get up, but Felix was holding her too tightly. Irene had no choice but to try waking Felix up. Felix smelled the familiar sweet scent. He groggily woke up, looking at the girl in his arms. He thought it was just a beautiful dream, so he tightly hugged the girl's waist, buried his head in Irene's embrace, and nuzzled like a little cat. Irene's face turned red as if about to explode. She softly called Felix's name. Felix suddenly became fully awake, so it wasn't a dream. He hurriedly moved away from Irene's shoulder, his face flushed as he apologized to Irene. Irene said it was fine. Then Felix pulled Irene up, preparing to look around for any clues. They came to a palace. Because both had fallen into the sea, their clothes were soaked, so Irene felt a bit cold. At this time, they saw two children wearing clothes from 4,000 years ago. These two children brought them food and clothes. After the two changed clothes, they entered the island's inner temple. But because of the demon in Felix's body, the elf king was attracted. He saw through Felix's situation at a glance, and without question wanted to kill Felix. Felix certainly wouldn't sit and wait for death. He used his remaining bit of magic power to forcefully fight against the legendary Elf King. But he ultimately couldn't defeat the Elf King. Finally, Felix was defeated and fell unconscious. Seeing this, Irene blocked in front of Felix, and facing the human girl obstructing him. The Elf King struck without hesitation, wanting to kill both of them. In an instant, tree branches tightened around Irene's neck. She thought she was going to die. But when she opened her eyes, she found herself lying in Felix's arms. Irene was about to thank Felix, but saw an unfamiliar look in Felix's eyes. Irene understood this guy wasn't Felix. She watched him condense a demonic bow, reach out to draw and aim at the Elf King. The Elf King, who had been dismissive, was instantly destroyed by half his body. Only then did the Elf King realize something was wrong. But the next arrow was already ready. He couldn't dodge at all. He could only be blasted to pieces by the powerful attack. Everything was finally over, but Irene was very nervous, because the current Felix was emanating a terrifying and sinister aura. His crimson eyes made Irene feel he would kill her. But Irene was pulled into his embrace. He had wanted to properly teach the girl before him a lesson, but seeing such a beautiful face, his heart immediately raced like a startled deer. So he suddenly pushed Irene away. Seeing his attitude, Irene was certain this wasn't Felix. She moved closer to touch him all over. "Where did you hide Felix?" The other party reached out to protect his innocence. The demon said this time Felix had actively made a deal, trading half his soul for Irene's safety. Irene's eyes filled with tears. She thought Felix was going to die. The demon quickly stopped her, telling Irene not to cry or this body would hurt. She thought it was the demon's guilty conscience. Hearing Irene's such straight girl statement, the demon nearly died of anger. A mere human was really too arrogant. He reached out wanting to strangle Irene. Just as he was about to act, he suddenly uncontrollably wiped away Irene's tears. Even if the soul was different, the body would unconsciously protect the girl. On the other side, when Claude first stepped onto the elf island, she was almost defeated mentally by illusions. Although she was a treasure in her family's hands, in outsiders' eyes, she was just a pretty doll. It was because she always relied on others that everyone left her. Even her brother was completely devoured by the demon. When the mad trio tempted her to give up resistance, she firmly clenched her fists, vowing she would definitely become stronger. In an instant, the inner demons dissipated. Claude released her suppressed emotions, forcing herself to calm down. She raised her hand to call the elf's name, but there was no response. Just as she was about to give up, sudden bright light illuminated the path before her. A beautiful figure slowly approached. She gently took Claude's hand. "Child, I've always been waiting for you to overcome your fear. And you haven't disappointed me. All difficulties will become the strength that supports you." But Claude had no time to listen to this. She was now focused only on signing a contract. She wanted to have the power to protect her family. Unfortunately, the woman couldn't agree. Although Claude's magic power was vast enough to even contract with the Elf King. She wasn't an elf, but she could take Claude to find the Elf King. Soon the two arrived at their destination. The woman removed the necklace from her chest. She pointed to the iron box in front of the grave. "That thing can help you contract with elves. I hope you can also take care of him for me." Everything seemed to go smoothly. After getting the clue, Claude came to find Irene and Felix. She happily said she could find elves to sign contracts with. But Irene panicked. She helplessly said, "We just destroyed that elf." Although Claude was somewhat confused, she said as long as they had the Elf King's heart, he could live. The three discussed how to make the elf appear. Her brother suggested they could stab the heart. Her brother's statement, which was seriously inconsistent with his personality, aroused Claude's suspicion. She questioned, "You're not my brother, are you?" after knowing the cause and effect. Although Claude was very angry about what the Elf King did, she understood he also had his difficulties. This time she wanted to ask personally, because Claude and Felix had similar appearances. Claude immediately aroused the Elf King's hostility. Facing his unfriendly attitude, Claude takes out her heart to get the other party's attention. The Elf King reaches out to snatch her heart, but suddenly sees the sapphire necklace Claude is wearing. Only then does Claude slowly speak, "Allowing me to formally introduce myself. I am your new master, Claudia. I know that 4,000 years ago, you resurrected her after Aslita's death, but have you ever wondered why she never came to see you? She wanted you to let go of your obsession and leave this place. Life becomes noble because of death. She wanted to protect you, so she hoped more that you could be free, rather than being imprisoned on this island." Soon, the group sets off for home. Looking at the familiar yet strange demon beside her, Claude suggests he put on his hat. The demon glares at Claude upon hearing this. How dare a mere human command him? The next moment, Claude's expression turns sinister, frightening the demon into immediately putting on his hat obediently. Then he quickly runs back to his room to avoid trouble. Unexpectedly, as soon as he opens the door, he sees Irene, whom he's been eagerly awaiting. Irene looks disappointed. "How is it still the demon Larage? When will you release my angel? Without him, I'll die." The demon grins wickedly. "Aren't you afraid he can hear this?" Irene is immediately frightened and panicked. Then she's told he was just joking. Irene wants to leave, feeling speechless. The next moment, a large hand reaches out. He easily lifts Irene up, seeing Irene so close to him. The demon nearly falls for her. He quickly drops Irene to calm his emotions. Irene suddenly remembers the demon is just a fragment. So to be precise, he's not really Larage. After all, no one would say dirt is themselves. To distinguish between them, Irene says, "How about I call you Larry from now on?" A strange feeling wells up in the demon's heart. Felix is clearly the one who likes Irene. He's just the demon inside his body. So why is his heart beating so fast right now? The cold brother finally makes his move. Faced with his beloved's provocation, Felix can no longer hold back and kisses Irene. But what should have been a perfect ending becomes the beginning of their separation. Even as Irene cries and tries to make him stay, Felix never looks back. Actually, from the first time Felix saw Irene, he had an extreme possessive desire for her. Whenever Irene was happy, he would go crazy with emotion, no matter what Irene did. He thought she was cute and beautiful when she spoke up for him. He would even be happy to the point of heartache. That was the sweetest feeling he'd ever had in the world. Irene was like a beautiful cat, making him constantly want to tame and possess her. But unknowingly, he was the one tamed by Irene instead, because Felix made a deal with the demon. His humanity was extracted, leaving only love and desire for her. But he didn't want to hurt Irene, so she had to escape. Only by leaving himself could he better protect Irene. But Felix would never know how much pain Irene would live in after he left. Soon 3 years passed. The crazy prince successfully ascended the throne. The trio became a top power in the empire. Claude also grew increasingly powerful. She used the Elf King's power to secure an extremely high position, while Irene spent every day researching potions, just to solve the problem of demonic consumption. Only by immersing herself in work could she ease her longing for Felix. Little did she know Felix had already been assimilated by the demon, becoming a war hero who struck fear into hearts, and also a killer who deserved to be cut into pieces. His brutal nature was like a walking god of death. He used a new appearance and name to successfully gain the crazy emperor's trust. The emperor not only wanted to promote him, but also specially held a grand palace banquet for this. Cedric also received intelligence. He hoped Irene could attend the banquet together, preferably to personally recruit that war hero. Now their plan was like a puzzle. She had a feeling this person was the key piece. But Irene was very reluctant. She really wasn't good at dealing with men. But faced with the second prince's request, she ultimately had no choice but to accept. Since it was an imperial victory banquet, of course she had to dress up grandly. Because Claude was busy with her career, Irene could only call her brother to attend the banquet, but she still hated this kind of atmosphere. Fortunately, she saw a familiar face. Erika skillfully mingled with everyone. Everyone was curious about what the war hero looked like. Even Erika was somewhat infatuated. Just as everyone was discussing, a servant announced the hero's entrance. The young ladies all looked toward the door in amazement. Black, beautiful hair, a strong and tall physique. The scar on his face added a bit of killing intent. Though it was a strange face, Irene could immediately confirm. He was Felix, who had left 3 years ago, after the banquet ended. Irene seemed to have lost her soul. Her brother found his sister's appearance strange. He curiously asked Irene, "Do you know that hero?" But Irene still looked dazed. Helplessly, her brother could only leave first. He told his sister to call him if anything happened. Actually, Irene didn't have any big problems. She just couldn't understand why Felix had changed so much in 3 years. The once gentle angel brother had now become a demon who killed without mercy. Though Irene felt this was unlikely, those eyes definitely belonged to Felix. He had left to protect his family back then. Even if he really transformed into a demon, coming back this time must also be to protect us. The banquet lasted 3 days. Irene also numbed herself with alcohol for 3 days. Fortunately, her brother was there to take care of her. Only after throwing his sister onto the bed did her brother understand. She had called him here just to take care of Irene. Though her brother was angry at his sister's decadence, he ultimately sighed softly, letting Irene rest well on her own. But her brother forgot Irene was sleeping face down. Irene couldn't stand being pressed by something on her chest. She yanked off the gem from her chest. This was what Felix had given her back then. He said as long as she broke the gem when she encountered danger again, Felix would appear to save her. But now 3 years had passed. The gem might no longer work, with a try-it-and-see attitude. Irene released the gem in her hand. The gem slowly fell due to gravity. The gem finally shattered on the ground. But nothing happened. Irene lowered her head somewhat disappointedly. She smiled bitterly, trying to comfort herself. Suddenly a cool breeze blew. Irene looked toward the windowsill in shock. Her anticipated hero had arrived. Irene looked at him excitedly, unconsciously getting up and approaching. She raised her hand wanting to touch Felix, but he trembled all over and wanted to retreat. In her excitement, Irene leaped up and hugged him. "Felix, this time I won't let go." The impact of inertia made both of them fall from the windowsill, while the man tightly protected Irene. Fortunately, neither was injured. Irene kept pouring out her longing for him. She begged Felix not to leave this time, but was coldly rejected by the man. He turned his head away saying, "I don't know the Felix you're talking about." But Irene was very determined, her hand touching the man's face. "Though your appearance has changed, your breathing and even your voice haven't changed. Please don't leave me this time, okay?" Tears fell in large drops from Irene's face. The man coldly pushed the girl away. He forced himself to say he hated Irene. But Irene didn't believe it at all. She grabbed the man's collar forcefully. "You just protected me with your body. I know you still love me." But the man had to harden his heart. He pushed the girl away harshly. "I really hate you," Irene retorted. "You clearly loved me before." The man said, "I've long forgotten that kind of feeling," though they were heartless words. Irene heard a different meaning. Irene hugged the man from behind. "So what you mean is, you did love me before." The man wanted to continue pushing Irene away. But Irene said with a smile, "If you dare push me, I'll kiss you." Helplessly, he could only persuade Irene to leave him. But Irene would never give up. "Even my soul can be given to you. I only ask that you stay by my side." Suddenly, voices came from the distance. To hide their relationship, the man could only cover Irene's mouth, then held her in that position hiding in the bushes, until the voices gradually faded away. Irene wasn't worried about being discovered. She actually licked the man's palm with her tongue. The man suppressed the desire in his heart, but Irene pressed her advantage. She cupped the man's face saying, "I know many things happened in these 3 years, but in my heart you'll always be that angel. So please don't leave again, okay?" Seeing the man still wouldn't speak, Irene threatened, "If you don't answer within 10 seconds, I'll kiss you." Hearing this, the man looked shocked. As the countdown slowly approached, he finally couldn't hold back and kissed Irene's lips again. A few seconds later, their lips slowly separated. He didn't know how to face Irene. "Why exactly? Why did you have to recognize me?" But this was Irene's love. Even just passing by, she would recognize Felix's face. The man's heart was completely in chaos. He tightly pulled the girl into his embrace. "You're so wonderful, how can I forget you?" Irene comforted that she belonged only to him, but it was all too late. As the midnight bell rang, the man helplessly dropped his arms. When he woke up again, Irene immediately realized something was wrong. Irene asked the man in front of her, "Are you Larry?" He wondered strangely how Irene was here, but Irene was equally puzzled. "Where did you hide, Felix?" It turned out their assimilation level was high. Every 12 hours their consciousness would switch. Irene understood what was happening, but why is this setting like Cinderella? But you seem to have other things to explain, right? Larry quickly explained in fright. Only then did Irene learn that Felix had lost his humanity. He lived entirely on his love for Irene and his hatred for the trio. Irene was troubled about how to restore Felix. Then she actually asked Larry in front of her, though he didn't want to say. Being limited by the body, he couldn't lie to Irene. He said as long as he died, Felix could recover. Hearing this, Irene said to Larry, "If that's the case, are you willing to die?" Tears instantly burst from Larry's eyes. He didn't understand why he was crying either. But Irene had no intention of comforting him. Instead, she continued to provoke him with words, even as Larry cried and begged Irene to stop talking. Irene still smiled and urged him to die. Hearing this, Larry excitedly tackled Irene to the ground. But Irene wasn't afraid at all. She only wanted to save the man she loved. "So Larry, I will definitely kill you." But to protect Felix, she decided to hide Larry first. Finally, Larry was stuffed into a pile of dolls. Larry found it strange that the dolls actually had Irene's scent. Irene explained it was because she usually slept hugging the dolls. Irene was troubled about how to save Felix. She asked Larry to help Felix. Larry said arrogantly, "I don't do things without reward." Irene suddenly had some mischievous thoughts. "So you want me to kiss you?" Larry was instantly scared, his face red and heart racing. After teasing Larry, Irene found the long-absent Elf King. Irene expressed that she wanted to borrow his power, but was directly refused by the Elf King. Irene had no choice but to use her trump card. She grinned wickedly, threatening him with the Elf King's heart, but he was already used to it. Who told Irene to always threaten him with this thing? The Elf King impatiently wanted to drive the girl away. Unexpectedly, Irene actually handed over the box containing the heart directly. Irene's retreating approach ultimately made the Elf King give in. However, as soon as the two met, the Elf King immediately felt disgusted beyond endurance, seeing the tough guy who liked dolls. The Elf King only felt his eyes were polluted. Irene actively dug Larry out of the doll pile. She explained, "He needs to go to the battlefield soon. Can you make a doll that looks like him?" This was simple for the Elf King. He was just curious about who he was. After learning it was Claude's brother, the Elf King immediately considered Claude's feelings. "I'll help you this time, but you must tell Claude in the best way possible. You absolutely cannot let her get hurt." Soon, Felix's form was basically completed. The rest needed individual refinement. Irene certainly wouldn't waste time. She decided to do something big. While the demon was sleeping, she wanted to have a good chat with Felix. Larry firmly objected. "You clearly have ulterior motives." Larry wanted to tell Irene how dangerous Felix was. He harbored endless desires within. "That's not something you can bear." But Irene didn't care at all. "Weren't these desires stirred up by you? So you have no right to say these things. Now you obediently sleep and let Felix out. I have many things I need to discuss with him." Hearing Irene's words, Larry suddenly felt his chest was about to be torn apart. He tremblingly asked Irene, "What exactly is this feeling?" Irene said, "Perhaps this is jealousy." "Now you have to take responsibility for your choices." "But why should he take responsibility?" Irene smiled and approached the man. "Because you love me. So from now on, whether painful or happy, you must accept it all." Larry immediately fell silent without refuting. Looking at the expectant Irene, Larry ultimately lay down obediently, just somehow. He felt like he had returned to hell, only able to exist alone, lonely and desolate. Soon Larry fell asleep. Irene became nervous instead. When Felix woke up later, should she cry and say how much she missed him? Or smile and say something playful? Irene's heart was so nervous it was about to explode. Now she could only use her trump card. Irene frantically poured herself alcohol to build up courage. At this moment, she suddenly felt something wrong behind her. Irene carefully turned around, only to see the man staring straight at her. "You actually haven't run away yet!" After saying this, he noticed his eyes stinging. Had the demon been crying? Irene awkwardly said she did it, "Because he was assimilated and fell in love with me. So I cruelly dumped him." Felix chuckled. "He has taken all my emotions. Then he should be more like the old me. Why did you reject him?" But Irene disagreed. "Though you look similar, you will always be you. My choice has always been you alone." Then Irene took out the gift she had prepared, a magic potion named Felix. Drinking it can make one remember happy memories. Irene waited expectantly for praise, though he couldn't understand now. He still gave Irene a head pat. Of course, Irene wasn't satisfied with just this. For a lover who was difficult to meet, her heart had long been filled with impulse. Seeing this, Felix could no longer suppress himself. He seized the opportunity to grab Irene's shoulders. "This time I won't be soft-hearted anymore. But Irene had already prepared for everything. After a night of madness, when the man woke up again, the soul in the body had become Larry, seeing bottles all over the floor. He immediately smelled it was healing potion. He didn't expect Irene to drink so much. He was terrified the girl might have died. Irene painfully told him to calm down. She wasn't injured, just a bit tired. She asked Larry to take her to see a doctor when he had time. After all, healing potions couldn't mend bones. Larry was immediately frightened into a shiver. He quickly checked where the girl had broken bones. Then without further delay, he carried Irene and set off. Seeing Larry looking somewhat dejected, Irene suddenly called his name. She apologized for what she said before being too harsh. Because she missed Felix too much, she said those things. But now she already knew Felix's condition. She would look for a way to separate the two of them. Hearing this, Larry was naturally happy, but he was more curious if Irene was happy last night. After all, Felix's skills came from him. Though Irene was angry that the demon had no tact, she still gave 100 hearts. Getting a satisfactory reply, Larry happily carried Irene away, leaving only a back full of scratch marks. Fortunately, Irene quickly bandaged her ankle. She once again reminded Larry, "Remember to say I sprained it. Kind Claude will definitely believe it." But Larry in front of her didn't respond. Irene wondered what he was thinking about. He said, "I want to have my own body." Irene suggested, "How about becoming a puppy? I'll not only feed you, but also take you for walks, and even play with you every day." Larry inexplicably felt somewhat expectant, but he still needed to be human, and he had to be taller and more handsome than Felix. "But even if I eventually disappear, I still hope to retain my love for Irene." Soon the Elf King brought news. Claude was about to arrive home. Irene panicked instantly. It was still the demon controlling Felix's body. Claude would definitely beat him up if she saw. To protect Felix's body, Irene could only find some shields. Claude finally saw her beloved best friend Irene, but she saw something she hated. Claude wondered, why is this guy here too? Though the second prince was a duke of the empire, he was careful around Claude. He could only signal Irene with his eyes to manage Claude. After all, it was Irene who called him here. Irene thought for a long time. She used the lame excuse of inviting them for lunch. The second prince laughed angrily. "Ha! Eating lunch first thing in the morning?" The second prince was so angry he wanted to kill someone. Seeing Irene looking a bit scared, Claude got angry at why he was yelling at Irene. Erika thought, for Irene, eating lunch in the morning was quite normal. The second prince was shocked. "Do I really have a problem?" At this moment, Claude suddenly noticed something wrong with Irene's foot. She reached out and lifted the skirt. Claude immediately saw the bandage on her ankle. She anxiously pressed Irene down. "How did you get hurt?" Irene said, "I accidentally fell from the balcony. Because you said I was an angel, so I wanted to try if I could fly." The second prince said, "This lame excuse is really unbearable. You should confess early." Claude glanced sharply at the second prince. "I heard you made Irene meet that killer." Hearing Claude's icy tone, Irene felt something bad was about to happen. Sure enough, Claude's eyes instantly turned cold. "It was that Wattel who hurt Irene, right?" Irene quickly grabbed Claude's sleeve. She knew she couldn't hide it anymore. Irene confessed, "There's something I must tell you. Felix is back. But because of a curse, he can only regain consciousness after the sun rises." Meanwhile, in the palace, the crazy duke handed over intelligence. The table was full of information about people around Claude, even including the dead Felix. But the prince immediately saw through all the false intelligence. All the materials were provided by Serentium, since they dared to use false intelligence. It meant Irene had already taken control of this organization. I'm really curious, if it were me, would I also be changed by her? Soon everything was settled. The puppet double replaced Felix, continuing to go to the battlefield to write the hero's story, while the real Felix became the family's beloved again. Irene and Felix's sweet cohabitation life officially began. But because Felix's strength was too great, he often tore books apart. Irene had a good solution. She reached out to take the book away, naturally sitting on Felix's lap. "I can help you turn the pages." But she forgot how dangerous this position was. After some ambiguous positions, Irene was so nervous her cheeks turned red. This guy wasn't looking at the book at all, but Felix knew the book's content. After Irene checked, everything matched up. Irene found it strange. Then why did Felix still want to read? It turned out Felix just wanted to recall past memories. Irene asked, "I heard you used the potion last time. What did you see?" Felix suddenly fell silent. He gently pinched the girl's hair and brought it to his lips to kiss. "I can't remember very clearly. I only remember I seemed to see a cat." He recalled that feeling, suddenly wanted to hug Irene, but was afraid of breaking her ribs. Irene actively stepped forward to hug Felix. At this moment, he was somewhat awkward. He didn't know what to do at this time. Irene reached out to take Felix's hand, placing his hand on her face. "You just need to praise me." Felix looked at the girl in front of him with amazement. He tightly hugged Irene and said, "Irene, you're really beautiful."